company.
All right, Kritika, many thanks for joining us. In fact, staying with 5G, the US has stepped up its attack on Huawei. The Defense Department claims that many Chinese companies, including Huawei, are backed by the Chinese military, and this could lead to a new fresh sanctions against these firms. So tensions over airwaves and tensions at the ports. Where does all of this leave business? Joining me now to take that discussion forward is Pankaj Mohindroo, the chairman of the India Cellular and Electronics Association. Also with us on the program, Vinod Sharma, the managing director of Deki Electronics and the chairman of CII's National Committee on Information, Communication, Technology and Electronics, Sharad Kumar Saraf, the president of the Federation of Indian Export Organization of FIO. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us here on the program. Pankaj, let me ask you, because you have written a letter. Let me get the other guests in before that. We're trying to re-establish contact with Pankaj. Vinod, we are given to understand that consignments are being held up at some ports. Chennai is where the problem first started. Has CII reached out to the government seeking clarity? Because when we've asked the government whether there is any order asking for consignments from China specifically to be examined, we were told that there is no such order. What are your members telling you about the situation on the ground?
Yes, Sheeren, you're absolutely right. It was Chennai that started this, I think, day before yesterday. And since then, all consignments coming out of China or Hong Kong are being held up. What we are being told, it's only a verbal order, so there's no written order as far as this is concerned. Obviously, this is causing a lot of inconvenience, discomfort to the entire supply chain, specifically for electronics, the sector that I belong to.
Okay. And did this start on the 22nd itself, or was this in play even before that?
No, it started only on the 22nd. So it wasn't in play before that at all.
Okay. Has there been any change on the ground so far? Because I would imagine that some of these containers that may have been put up for re-examination, we are given to understand basis intelligence inputs, etc. Has there been any forward movement at all?
आवाज नहीं आ रही कंप्यूटर में. Hello?
Not yet, Sheeren. They have not been. In fact, none of the consignments. I was just checking with my colleagues at CII. None of them have been released yet.
Nothing being released yet. Let me go across to Mr. Saraf at FIO. Mr. Saraf, has FIO reached out to the government seeking clarity on this? So what is your concern? We've just heard here from CII that all consignments since the 22nd, starting with the Chennai port, are stuck. What's the feedback that you're getting?
Yes, that's a fact. It has started from Monday. All of a sudden, all the consignments from China and Hong Kong were being opened up for detailed investigation. When we asked for any written notification or circular, nothing was provided. It said only a verbal instructions have come. We thought it was a small localized issue, but then rapidly it spread. And then Mumbai Customs started opening up consignments of containers originating from China. So it started a little bit escalating. Yesterday, then we came to know that it was because of some intel report that they were opening containers in Chennai, and now they would stop opening up all the containers. So we wrote to, but in the meanwhile, what happened was some letters from some associations of shipping brokers went viral, and they even reached China, and there was a fear that there could be retaliation from the Chinese side by or doing similar actions from their end. And this because now no government notification has come, we have asked the Commerce Ministry to issue suitable clarification, so that trade is put at rest. I think by today evening or early tomorrow, we should have some kind of a clarification coming out from the government on
Okay,
this.
you are still waiting for clarification, and as we pointed out, we have also reached out to the government. What we have been told so far is there is no such order, but perhaps we will see a clarification being issued, as Mr. Saraf points out, at some point during the course of the day, or perhaps even tomorrow. Pankaj, you have also written to the government. It's a fairly detailed letter that you've written, and you believe that this is going to hurt us in the long run. This will hurt India's aspiration of becoming a manufacturing hub, and that seems to be the message that the ISPF has also sent out to the government, saying that this sends out a chilling message to foreign investors.
Sheeren,
the AEO, which is the authorized economic operator, this is such a beautiful scheme, and I think it has contributed in India going many notches up in ease of doing business. Now, AEO takes just a few hours, and that's what we are used to. That is what is configured in our supply chain management, that the authorized economic operators, which is a world custom organization program where we have commitments. Now, these operators, which is our large companies, are used to this, clearance in a flash. It takes just a few hours. So, and we are a just-in-time industry. You see, by our characteristic, we are a just-in-time industry. So, what do we have? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, Pankaj, we can hear you. Go ahead. We seem to have lost that line with Pankaj. But Mr. Saraf, let me come back to you now, sir. This is also coming in the context of a discussion that's currently underway at the DPIIT. The DPIIT, we are given to understand, has drawn up a list of almost 1,200 items, and there is the possibility of higher import duties, other restrictions being imposed. Now, can or should India go down that path of hiking import duties, or perhaps putting a ban altogether on some items, which seems to be the suggestion?
Well, we have addressed this issue as well. Putting a blanket ban suddenly would be counterproductive, because there are certain raw materials and certain components that we need in our manufacturing, and that can come only from China at present, because the other sources or other solutions have not been made so far. What we need to do is to be very calibrated in our approach. We need to ramp up our production facilities here, so that whatever we are importing from China is produced here in the country in a cheaper and in a better quality. That is one thing. Secondly, if at all we were to take some trade measures, then we should try to look at restricting our export of raw materials to China. We are exporting cotton, we are exporting some spices like chili, and we are importing oleoresins. We are exporting certain basic chemicals and basic pharma products, and importing back finished products. So we have to identify the raw material and look at the possibility of either putting some cess on their export to China, or giving some quota on export of these items to China. Because, for example, by shipping cheap cotton to China, our textile chain is suffering. So, this is another way of looking at doing in China. But we must not forget that there could always be a retaliatory measure, and our export to China is 5% of our total exports, while the Chinese export to India is hardly 2%. Okay, so we stand to lose a lot more.
So you're saying we stand to lose more than China, and hence our response must be calibrated. But Vivek, let me come back to you now, and let's talk specifically about the sector that you're most well versed with. The government has announced 3 schemes specifically, to try and target investments into the electronic manufacturing sector, from mobile handset to perhaps even chips. Now, do you believe that given the current tensions, the current standoff, there is a possibility of reviewing applications from Chinese companies and so on and so forth? Do you think that maybe those schemes could be adversely impacted because of the current standoff?
Sheeren, no business anywhere in the world likes such kind of uncertainty and unpredictability. So you're absolutely right. We have no doubts in our minds that this will have an impact. But I think the government also at the moment is faced with a very, very tough and I would say a crucial decision-making phase. While on the one hand, there is no doubt in our minds as Indians that we need to get more Atmanirbhar. There is our reliance on imports and specifically on China in this sector is just too high. It's not sustainable.
Yes.
And so these schemes of PLI, EMC 2.0 and specs were just the perfect solution. And I would say just a beginning of the solution, because they aim more at mobile phones and at some components. but we also have many other products that hopefully will find the same thing. We are very happy that PLI was also picked up and is now available for medical equipment, for example. So while we were doing the right thing from a medium-term perspective, what has happened since day before yesterday in the short term has really come to us as a shock and is disrupting our supply chains. I would say unnecessarily. I don't think anybody is benefiting from this. And even our Chinese suppliers have begun to ask us questions about whether they should put the new consignments on the ships or hold them back. So I think that uncertainty is definitely not good for us.
Yes, uncertainty is certainly not good for business. Pankaj, we've got you back with us. You were talking about how this uncertainty is playing out and hurting sentiment. The ICEA has members from Japan, Taiwan, America, Europe. What is the view within these foreign investors at this point in time, given what we've seen happen over the last few days?
Frankly, we are all spooked. All of these guys are spooked, and there is no clarity. You see, what is happening is that when the assessments are going on, the CHA is being asked some really silly questions just to postpone it. So we are not looking good at all. Sheeren, let me give you a perspective. You see, this self-sufficiency, just to inform you, you would know actually quite well that 97% of mobile phones are now made in India.
Yes.
And the import from China is very tiny, right? But let me ask you a question. What is the import of electronics in China, not the export of electronics? The import of electronics in China is about $400 billion. So the entire world is connected. And this kind of impasse is only going to hurt our Indian economy, which is recovering from COVID with very great difficulty. Today, we have just reached about 40% of our volumes of, say, January and February. And availability of labor is a very big issue at the moment because the people left after the lockdown lifted. And to get them back is very difficult.
Yeah.
So the industry is struggling very badly. And I think we don't need this now and at any time. This is impossible to stomach.
Impossible to stomach. You're saying that foreign investors have been spooked by the disruption that has taken place over the last few days. Mr. Saraf, let me give you the closing comments because DPIIT has sought comment on that list that has been drawn up. So I would imagine that consultations are still underway. What has been your response to the government specifically on that list that's been drawn up, the implications of putting restrictions, higher import duties, etc.?
Well, one has to see that list. What all does it include? Because at one point of time they said we would consider banning cheap and substandard quality products from China. But then what is cheap and what is substandard? That definition is not there. So it all depends on what is included. If there are industrial raw materials and industrial products there, then it will definitely affect our production here. For example, if I am producing a product for export that has got 5 inputs and one of the inputs is coming from China, and if that gets banned, then my export product would be affected very badly. I agree with what Mr. Mohindroo just mentioned, that without thinking, without proper analysis, if we go in for a blanket ban, we may be hurting ourselves more than what we would be doing anything to China. So I think it requires a very, very careful study. We have to see what that list is, and we have to analyze each item, what effect it will have. Only then we should go ahead with it, and not simply just a blanket ban. As I would like to repeat that we should consider selling our raw material to China and give them the cost advantage. That is more important than anything else.
Yes, so a review is currently underway. A final decision has not been taken on that list that's been drawn up by the DPIIT. We know the last word in from you. We're hoping that there is clarification from the government. But is this restricted only to Mumbai and Chennai, or are you getting reports coming in from other ports as well?
all the ports, including Delhi and even at the airport.
Oh, okay, at the airports as well.
I would say the least that we want the government to do is at least not charge demurrages and warehousing charges at this point of time, because it's no fault of the importer that this is happening. Number one. Number two, let's not forget that in the medium term, we stand solidly behind the government as an industry. There are things we can do in India just because of our love for L1 and for buying the cheapest. I think we have really shot ourselves in the foot for a long period of time. So we need to understand which are the sectors in which we can be self-reliant, or let's say we can add more value within the country. And there will be some, for example, in cell phones, where our dependence for material and components will continue to be there for a long time. We can have a 2, 3, 4, and I know Pankaj and ICEA has done a wonderful job of a phased manufacturing program along with the government. So what I'm saying is that we all, in CII, we always say it's India first, industry next, and then CII third, and our own companies we never talk about. So taking that protocol, I would say we stand behind the fact that India needs to do more. We can do much more manufacturing. We can create much more jobs.
Yeah.
And we need to do that. But in that process, let's not do these knee-jerk reactions, which only hurt ourselves and our own interests in the immediate term.
Yes, knee-jerk reactions not warranted. Pankaj, a quick final word from you. There's also this consultation process underway on country of origin being included on e-commerce websites like Amazon, Flipkart. The government-run GEM portal has already made that mandatory. How are you reading this development, and what will the implications be?
Sheeren, a small programmer can do that. This is just one extra field in that. Already, under the legal metrology, this is carried. The country of origin is carried. So to put it on a e-commerce website, I do not know if this will add any value, or it will change consumer behavior at all. I don't think it's of very great relevance. This DPIIT list, I'd like to comment for a few seconds. I saw that list. I went into it in great detail personally. And I see that low quality goods includes products like lithium ion cells, which is, very high technology items.
Yeah.
And China is the biggest country for lithium ion products, which is a key product for electronics and this thing. We make almost all battery packs now in India, but cells are coming from there, and it will take us 2-3 years to put up large cell capacities, which we are working on at the moment. So, Sheeren, we are studying every single HSN code in electronics, and we are coming out with a strategy of how to make India a giant global player in mobiles and electronics, and that's the direction in which we are moving. That will take time, and to reach China's level, it will take us about 10 years. But we should be dogged, and we should be very determined about it. And certainly these, shooting in the foot type reactions are not going to help us.
Yes, that's the message, clear, unequivocal from industry. Knee-jerk reactions will only hurt Indian industry, and India's national interests will not benefit China. So be mindful about restrictions on imports, bans on imports from China, and especially on this issue that has caused a lot of discomfort, which is the embargo at ports, mostly in Chennai and Bombay, as well as at some airports that industry has cautioned about and written to the government seeking clarification. Pankaj, Mohindroo, Vinod and Mr. Saraf, many thanks for joining us here on this special edition of CNBC TV 18's program. Time for us to head into a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment.